This episode is for the writer who is overwhelmed with all the different steps of publishing and needs a guide, not just an editor. The story behind this episode comes from work that I did in the earlier days of this business, and I learned a lesson that I've taken with me into how I support, work with, and interact with writers now. The way that I move as a memoir editor and writing coach now is a direct response to this mistake that I made almost 4 years ago. Let's dive in.
You are listening to the Memoir Method podcast, the place for writers, readers, and anyone who appreciates the collective power of our stories. In this podcast, we explore the impact of memoir alongside an examination of writing techniques and strategies used in the genre. Whether you are a writer looking for inspiration and guidance or a passionate reader seeking meaningful connections through shared experiences, the Memoir Method podcast is your go-to conversation spot. I'm your host, Charlotte, editor, writer, and the heart behind Charlotte Writes. Let's get started.
Let me introduce you to this client. We will call her C. When she sent her draft to me, it was pretty raw. Had a very journal entry feeling. It was scattered, but she was also incredibly convicted in what she was here to say. She came into our work knowing that she wanted to help other people. She knew exactly how her story was going to connect with her reader and why it was important. This client was writing about her struggles with an eating disorder, and she was obsessed with changing the cultural conversations about bodies, weight, and food. Her memoir was in direct conversation with an existing cultural topic, right? Here's what I loved working with her. She was a great action taker. When I gave her feedback, she acted on it and came back soon with more for me to work on and get my teeth into. She took her work seriously. She showed up. She was a busy mom to young kids, and she still made her memoir a priority. I really admired that. And her energy was infectious. I really enjoyed working with her. What we accomplished in just 3 months blew even my mind. We clarified her message, we reshaped her narrative, we strengthened her structure, and her actual writing quality elevated quite a bit. We took those journal entry passages and really shaped them and morphed them into actual scenes that the reader could immerse themselves in and where the emotion came through. Here's where I got it wrong. This client was incredible. Here's where I fell short. I kept my role as her guide and editor smaller than it could have been. In my editing courses when I was in college, that's where I learned all of these different skill sets with editing as I took courses in my university. And I came to understand editing as filling a very specific role. There were boundaries and guardrails about what I was supposed to do and what I was not supposed to do. And so I was moving in this relationship with this client as if being her editor meant only editing, like sentence level developmental improvements. I didn't prepare her for the publishing process because I didn't think that was my job. And honestly, that felt easier to me. There was less pressure on me. I can never guarantee a memoir's publication even now, whether that's through traditional publishing or self-publishing. But when I steered clear of that end of publishing altogether, it did feel safer instead of helpful. As we concluded our work together, I didn't give her the tools that she needed to finish and bring her work into the world. I gave her some next action steps, and then I wished her well. I was encouraging, I was effusive in my support and in my cheerleading, but I didn't actually give her what she needed to go long term. And I didn't put those puzzle pieces together until a couple years later. When I look back on that client, I'm filled with some conflicting emotions. I feel a little bit of regret and sadness and a motivation to do better because I could have shown up differently. And I also hope that her passion and conviction led her to the right people, since at that time I hadn't realized what my own role needed to be with you. I don't actually know what happened next for this writer. I haven't heard from her since. And that makes me a little sad because I loved this writer. I loved her story. And I want this book to get into the hands of readers. So I can't speak for other genres, but I do truly believe that memoir editing requires more from its editors. And I had to learn this the hard way. So there are fewer resources for memoir writers than there are for fiction writers. And that mentorship gap is what will stop so many memoirists from finishing and publishing their work. It's funny because the publishing industry right now is actually so much more accessible than it's ever been. There's still that gatekeeping that you can run into, but there's so many ways around it, more than there ever used to be. And yet, memoir writers specifically can get stuck in these loops and don't have access to the actual support systems, the actual professionals who can help them bridge that gap from lived experience to book on shelves. Because not only are you so close to your own story, that having an objective professional on your team is invaluable in helping you shape your manuscript. So many of my clients are unfamiliar with the publishing world at large and need a guide through that. And additionally, many of my clients have never considered themselves writers before they decided to write a memoir. And so if you fall into that camp, you are in good company. Many of my clients haven't ever thought about themselves as writers before starting their memoir. They had that pull to share their story, and then they took a leap. And if you are familiar with my free training, the Memoir Breakthrough, you will know that first draft energy can carry you far. But breaking out of that rewrite loop is a whole different ask. If you are unfamiliar with what the rewrite loop is, I go into that inside of the Memoir Breakthrough, but the name of that process should tell you a lot. You just rewrite the same things over and over and over. So in my years of doing this work, I have learned that you don't just need an editor. You need a coach and a mentor to shepherd you through the process and help you plan out your long game. And again, this is regardless of whether you have considered yourself a writer before now or not. I do most of my work at the high-level developmental edits. For clients who are ready, I will perform a line edit on their work after we complete the developmental work. But this developmental editing should not and cannot be transactional for you. Again, this is where we're shifting from I'm going to hand off my work to an editor to I'm going to work with a coach and a mentor to help me understand this process and to actually know what to expect from editing. Again, what my work has morphed into is this editing coaching hybrid. You need someone to help you see that all of these different phases of writing, drafting, revision, publishing are not self-contained or separate. And I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. I was not trained to think that way. I was trained to see the different roles of editing and the different types of editing. If you're a copy editor, then you're a copy editor. If you're a line editor, then you're a line editor. But what I learned in actually working with writers, and memoir writers specifically, is that what we do in the developmental stage is essential for revisions, and it is essential for publishing. These are all interconnected stages where the success of one relies on the success of the previous stages. And I wish I had seen this complexity sooner, especially for this writer, C, but now I'm ready to show up in this full capacity for you. To give you a solid takeaway from my biggest mistake as an editor, I will leave you with this reframe. You are not an aspiring memoir author. You are an author right now. When you can tap into that future version of yourself who's already published, you will move differently, more confidently, more strategically than you are right now. And when you understand this mental shift that you make, which again, that is really the first step that I do with all my writers in all my spaces, is shift from I'm an aspiring writer to I am a memoir author. This shift is going to change how you approach revision, how you dial into the clarity behind your draft, how you decide to structure, how you approach engaging your readers and attracting a readership now, and it builds your confidence. What choices would you make if you knew that your book would be published? Guaranteed. Like, that's the question that you get to ask yourself every day. And that's how you take yourself seriously right now. And that's the core of how I mentor my writers now. My memoir method, which you've heard me talk about before, this became a full spectrum approach to writing and publishing because of my experience with this writer several years ago. When I first created the memoir method, which happened after I had wrapped up work with C, I still hadn't quite realized this missing piece. In the memoir method now, this upgraded level up program that has its roots in a much smaller scope, I give you the tools to finish and publish your memoir. This is where you not only tap into the creative clarity that will make your writing fun again, but you'll know how to use that clarity as an author right now. This is the basis of everything that you will do as a writer and an author, and I show you how. Inside of the memoir method cohorts, we dial in on your foundational clarity, how to articulate your message, how to be aware of your reader and what they are experiencing, what they need to experience. We go into the strategy behind your structure, you plan out your revisions, and you understand the publishing pipeline in a much deeper, integrative way. Throughout all of this, you are understanding your identity as an author better and better every week. I am not going to let my writers walk away without the tools and the steps that they need to actually finish and publish. So if you've been compartmentalizing publishing like I have before, I'll figure out the publishing side later, you're thinking too small and you're making the process go even longer for you. If you've been revising before you get clarity on what your draft is actually saying, then you're going in the wrong order. And if you've been writing without seeing yourself as an author now, if you've been writing from the aspiring writer state, your momentum will keep collapsing. What I want you to do is I want you to see how the long game will change how you write. It will change your writing and revisions process. Once you know where you're going, your process has an anchor and your identity has an anchor as you navigate this experience. You become the version of yourself who finishes her draft. So if you want support from someone who doesn't just edit your memoir, but helps you become an author who finishes it, go ahead and email me. I help writers in several different ways. I do work privately with writers, and I will include a link for you to book a free call if you want to talk through that and what that would look like for you. I am also running Memoir Method cohorts. So our spring cohort is going to kick off in April. I will include a link in the show notes for you to join the waitlist for that when space opens up. Space in these cohorts is limited because I go really deep with you inside of this container and I get to know your memoir and who you are as a writer. So go to the show notes for the waitlist link for that. And finally, I invite you to watch my free training, the Memoir Breakthrough. I'll include a link to that as well. This helps you understand what your process is missing and how to snap in the right puzzle pieces. I mentioned the rewrite loop a few minutes ago. This is a training that breaks down what that actually is and why it is essential that you move your way, transition your way out of that loop into intentional revision. So I break that down in the Memoir Breakthrough training. All of those will be in the show notes. And you can always connect with me on Instagram as well. I'm there in stories, in reels. I'd love to see you in DMs. And you can tell me about your memoir and where you're at and what we can troubleshoot there. So thank you so much for joining me. And I'm just really honored for the writers who are here now and sending some gratitude to the writers who helped me be the editor and the writing coach that I am right now, because I wouldn't be that version, that big picture, also detailed guide that I am now if it weren't for the writers who I worked with several years ago. Thanks again for joining me. I will see you next week.
You've just listened to an episode of the Memoir Method podcast. The Memoir Method podcast is presented by Charlotte Writes. If you liked what you heard, the best way to support the show is to subscribe through your preferred podcast player. And if you're feeling especially inspired, I'd love it if you left a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Leaving a review really does help other readers and writers like yourself find the show. If you want to continue the conversation, you can find me on my website at charlottewrites.co or on Instagram at charlottejanewrites. Thank you for tuning in. I'll see you next time. And remember that you have a story that matters.